let's jump into some of the products you've been working on.
Mhm.
First thing, which is a product that is before I even knew you, is HODL contracts. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
Yeah, HODL contracts are a way of emulating the experience of having, the user experience of DLCs on the Lightning Network. So what I wanted to do with HODL contracts is I wanted to allow people to make conditional payments that are conditional on real world events. An example might be a ball game. I would love it if you could send somebody a Lightning payment for, let's say, $500, but they only get that $500 if the Packers win the World Series. I think I mixed up some sports there, but
Yeah.
yeah, like only if this real world event happens does the payment go through. Uh, that's what I designed HODL contracts to be. I wanted to do that on Lightning. We've had ways to do that on Bitcoin Space Layer for many years. Actually, it's even talked about in the Bitcoin white paper, that you can use escrow to allow a payment to be conditional on something on the say so of someone else. But when Lightning came out, it was a lot less. It threw away a lot of the programming functionality that makes Bitcoin a very flexible programming environment. So I wanted to find a way to bring that back, to bring back the ability to have like business logic in a Lightning payment. And HODL contracts were the way I achieved that. So the user experience you get when you set up a HODL contract is you set out some terms and conditions, and you say like you and your counterparty, like I always use Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob agree on what should trigger the payment, and what real world event their payments should be conditional on, and then they make payments to one another. So Alice sends a $500 payment to Bob. Bob sends one to Alice, and both of them route through the same routing node. And the routing node then acts as an oracle. So routing nodes do not have to immediately forward a payment. They have the option of waiting until the payment expires before, like they can wait all the way up until the payment expires, and either let it fail or forward it the rest of the way. So I make a routing node into an oracle there, where he reads the terms of their contract, waits until the ball game happens, and then whichever side wins, he allows the loser's payment to go through to the winner, and cancels the winner's payment to the loser so that the winner gets their money back. And that way they end up with, if it's an Alice and Bob situation and Bob wins, Bob gets Alice's money and he gets his own money back. So he's the victor, and he gets the spoils. So I created HODL contracts so you could do stuff like that. And then I wrote out a couple of other example contracts. You can do the ball game contract in them, but you can also do lending with that, where Alice makes a payment to Bob, uh, which serves as collateral. And if Bob makes his and Bob gives Alice a certain amount of Bitcoin in return as principal. And then if Alice pays off her loan, if she sends Bob his payment back plus interest, then the Oracle cancels her collateral payment to Bob, and she gets her collateral back. Otherwise, if she doesn't make her payment, uh, the Oracle settles the collateral payment so that Bob gets Alice's collateral. So you can do lending with that. And then I showed how you could do futures contracts once you have lending. So that you can do a whole lot with this. You can do ball game contracts, lending, futures contracts, price gambling. You could do lotteries with it. You could basically add any kind of smart contracting you want, because the routing node that's between the two people who are paying each other um, acts as the person who uh, runs the logic of the contract, and then settles the payment or cancels the payment based on what that logic tells them. So that's I think is one of the coolest things I've invented, was HODL contracts, and
Mm.
yeah, it's a really powerful tool that lets you do all sorts of really cool contracts on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you can do sports betting, you can do futures, you can do any sort of financial product.
Mm-hmm.
Um, has anyone picked up on the progress you made here and decided to like build out, sports betting on Lightning or some other application with it?
Nope. There was a company called Lightning Escrow who tried to use my technology to enable that, and they shifted after a couple of months of working on it. they shifted away and decided to just become bid escrow, where they don't support Lightning anymore. And part of the reason they did that is because because of one of the drawbacks of using the Lightning Network for these types of payments, which is that Lightning payments they time out after a certain amount of time. So I talked about how the Lightning or the routing node between them, between Alice and Bob, can wait until the payment expires, or he can wait all the way up to then, and 5 seconds before it expires, he can either finish forwarding it or not. Well, the time limit for an expiration on a Lightning payment is only about a week. So he really only has about 1 week to make his decision. And that really limits the usefulness of these things. Like if you're going to do any kind of loan, it's probably for longer than a 1 week term limit. If you're going to do any kind of futures contract, it's probably longer than that. So really, the only thing you could do with this probably is like sports betting, where you could set up the bet 3 days in advance of the game, and then use it for that. But Bid Escrow wanted to do something more than they wanted. They wanted the more flexible option to have lots of different kinds of contracts, and so they dropped support for the Lightning Network after having worked on it for a couple of months. So they were the only ones, as far as I'm aware, that have actually tried to work with this technology. I also presented at it for a what's it called, a hackathon by the Bolt.fun folks. So there was a Bolt.fun hackathon a year ago, I think, where I presented HODL contracts and how to use them for this stuff. And I think one of the winners of that hackathon used them in his project. But I'm not aware of anyone else who's ever actually used them for anything.
Interesting. Yeah, I just think sports betting would be a perfect use case for this, just because I look at it's slightly different, but I look at derivatives for someone like LN Markets. I think they just had a record month in June of, I believe, $50 million in volume. It's like that's a sizable amount. You could build a pretty solid sports betting business using this technology, and probably amass a similar market size, a similar amount of volume every month. Seems pretty reasonable to me. So glad that idea is out in the world, and hopefully this podcast can be illuminating for folks who have not yet heard of you or have not yet heard of all the things you built, and maybe someone will pick it up.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in building a sports betting website or anything else that you think HODL contracts would be useful for, it's on my GitHub. It's a Python application with a REST API. You can try it out there, or if you have any questions, and I'm happy to help. If you want any help building it, I'm right here. So
Cool.
reach out to me.